What if I told you the coolest gun in television history was actually a commercial disaster? A pistol built by a legendary gunfighter, chambered for a cartridge so brutal even the FBI eventually admitted they could not fully tame it, and strapped to the hip of a detective so effortlessly cool that an entire decade tried to copy his wardrobe. Fewer than 1,500 of these were ever built before the company behind it went bankrupt, and yet collectors still hunt them down like buried treasure. Stick around, because this story is stranger and far more important to modern policing than almost anyone realizes. Today, we are stepping into pastel suits and neon-lit nightclubs for the Bren Ten, the pistol that helped define an entire television decade in the hands of Sonny Crockett on the show Miami Vice. The origin story. The Bren Ten was born from one of the most ambitious ideas in modern handgun history, to build the ultimate fighting pistol from scratch. In the early 1980s, two entrepreneurs named Thomas Dornhaus and Michael Dixon set out to create a service pistol with more stopping power, reliability, and ergonomics than anything else on the market. To make that vision real, they brought in one of the most respected names in the firearms world, Colonel Jeff Cooper, the godfather of modern pistol craft and founder of a legendary shooting academy. Cooper had long dreamed of a cartridge that split the difference between the fast, flat-shooting 9mm and the heavy, slower 45, and this project handed him the platform to build it. The result was the 10mm Auto, developed with a Swedish ammunition maker, a round that hit noticeably harder and flatter than anything comparable at the time. The pistol built to fire it borrowed its basic shape from a well-regarded Czech service pistol, but Dornhaus and Dixon reimagined it in stainless steel with a slide that rode inside the frame rather than around it, a crisp double-action trigger, and a 10-round magazine that could be safely carried cocked and locked. It looked like something out of the future, rugged, angular, and unmistakably different from every other pistol on a shelf in 1983. But here is where the dream started cracking. Early production guns shipped without magazines because of an overseas supply dispute, quality control could not keep pace with overwhelming demand, and the hot-loaded ammunition needed to unlock the cartridge's full potential put real strain on the design. By 1986, barely 3 years after the first pistols reached customers, the company collapsed into bankruptcy. Somewhere between 1,300 and 1,500 Bren Tens were ever built in total, which is exactly why finding one today, especially a full-sized example, is such a serious hunt for collectors. Design that looked like the future. Mechanically, the Bren Ten offered a genuinely thoughtful package for its era. The internal slide rails borrowed heavily from a proven Browning-style linkless locking system, giving it a reputation among early testers for a remarkably smooth, double-action trigger pull. One contemporary gunwriter called it one of the best triggers he had ever tested. Buyers could also order optional 45 ACP barrel and slide assemblies, letting a single frame swap calibers, rare flexibility for a duty pistol at the time. A shorter Special Forces configuration was also offered for buyers who wanted something more concealable without giving up the platform's core design. None of this came cheap. At launch, the Bren Ten carried a price tag of roughly $500, a serious sum for a service pistol in the early 1980s, and demand still outstripped what the small company could reliably produce. Magazines briefly became impossible to find after that overseas supplier dispute halted shipments, leaving early buyers holding an expensive pistol with nothing to feed it. Even Cooper himself, years later, admitted in an interview that the finished product was not entirely sound as a fighting pistol, a rare moment of candor from the man who helped conceive it. That gap between soaring ambition and shaky execution is the whole story of this gun in one sentence. The cartridge's second life. Here's where the story gets genuinely fascinating, because the Bren Ten itself failed commercially, but the cartridge it introduced absolutely refused to disappear. After a deadly 1986 shootout involving FBI agents in Miami, the Bureau went searching for a round with more penetration and stopping power than their standard service pistols could deliver, and they landed on the 10mm Auto, adopting it in a full-sized Smith & Wesson service pistol. The problem was recoil. Agents found the stiff recoil springs difficult to rack under stress, the muzzle blast sharp, and the pistol itself large and heavy to qualify with. Smith & Wesson's fix was elegant. Shorten the case, trim the powder charge, and keep most of the stopping power in a package that recoils far more manageably. That downloaded cartridge became the .40 caliber Smith & Wesson, and it went on to dominate American law enforcement holsters for the better part of 2 decades, only giving ground to modern 9mm hollow points once bullet technology closed the performance gap in the 2000s. Think about that for a second. A pistol that only sold a few thousand units ended up reshaping duty caliber choices for tens of thousands of officers who never fired a single Bren 10 in their lives. It might be one of the strangest legacies in modern firearms history, a commercial failure whose fingerprints still sit on nearly every police duty belt in the country, just wearing a smaller case. The gun inside the show. When Miami Vice premiered, its creative team wanted a sidearm that looked as forward-thinking as the show's neon-lit visual style, and the Bren 10 fit perfectly. Production armed Sonny Crockett with a full-sized 5-inch barreled example finished in bright hard chrome, specifically so it would catch camera light during night shoots. The polished slide, throwing back reflections of neon signage in a way a standard blued finish could not replicate on film. Because reliable 10mm blanks were hard to source in the mid-1980s, the actual guns on set were quietly configured to cycle 45 ACP blanks instead. Invisible to viewers, but a clever workaround behind the scenes. Crockett only carried the Bren 10 for the show's first 2 seasons, and that is where it gets interesting. Once Dornis and Dixon folded, the production needed a new signature sidearm, and Crockett transitioned to a stainless Smith & Wesson pistol built around a staggered column magazine for seasons 3 and 4. A chunkier, more conventional automatic that traded some of the Bren 10's exotic flair for dependable, off-the-shelf reliability. When that model was discontinued partway through the show's run, Crockett moved once more, this time to its direct successor, a slimmer stainless 45 that streamlined the design while keeping the same no-nonsense energy. Across the full run of the series, Crockett effectively carried a walking timeline of automatic pistol design, and spotting the transition points between seasons became a fun rewatch exercise. Intermission. Quick pause for a word from today's sponsor, then right back to South Beach. If you have not already, check the pinned comment for details, and while you are down there, drop a guess in the comments for which other well-known action movie features its hero, dual-wielding a pair of that same final season sidearm, because I am working on that exact breakdown right now, and I want to see who gets there first before the episode drops. Seeing it up close. I own one of the Smith & Wesson pistols connected to this whole story, the one the FBI adopted after that Miami shootout, complete with its original agency documentation. The Bureau originally ordered a large batch of these pistols, but only a couple thousand were ever delivered before the contract was scrapped, since agents found more guns than most wanted to carry every day. Most of those returned pistols were destroyed, though a small number of agents were allowed to purchase their issued gun outright, which makes a documented example like mine a genuinely uncommon find today. I still have the original issued holster and magazine pouches that came with it, small details that add up to a well-documented slice of that agency's history. Holding it next to photographs of the Bren 10 really drives home just how directly one troubled pistol program ended up shaping the next. Why it only ever belonged to Crockett. Here is something worth sitting with for a second. Almost no other film or television production ever picked up either of Crockett's signature pistols, the Bren 10 included, after Miami Vice finished with them. It is as if the character claimed each gun so completely that other productions looked elsewhere. The Bren 10's only other notable screen appearance is a genuine blink and miss moment in a 1990s action blockbuster. A brief glimpse of a two-tone variant that most viewers blink past without registering, gone from frame before you can even confirm it. For a pistol this visually striking, that kind of exclusivity is rare. And it says a great deal about how thoroughly Don Johnson's performance became fused with this specific piece of hardware in the public imagination. Grading the movie gun. Now for the part you have been waiting for, grading this pistol's portrayal across capacity, caliber, and character accuracy. Before the scores, here is one strange bit of trivia. Fans have long claimed the Bren 10's gunshot sound stays identical across every season, possibly recycled from a famous 70s Magnum revolver recording. I cannot confirm that fully, but once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. Capacity first. A real Bren 10 holds 10 rounds of 10mm auto in its magazine. Watching through the relevant seasons, engagements stay tightly controlled, mostly landing in the 2 to 5 shot range, and reloads appear when the story calls for them, rather than being skipped entirely. That kind of restraint is rare for an 80s action show, where gunfights routinely blow past a weapon's real-world capacity without a second thought, and it holds up remarkably well under scrutiny even decades later. Grade A. Caliber capability next. The 10mm auto genuinely earns its fearsome reputation, launching a heavy bullet fast enough to noticeably outperform a standard 9mm and even most Magnum revolver loads of the era, delivering enough muzzle energy that shooters at the time had to step up to a 44 Magnum to beat it. On screen, targets typically go down after 2 or 3 center hits, staggering backward convincingly rather than flying off their feet in that classic exaggerated movie fashion. It is a rare case of a TV production actually respecting the physics of the round its hero carries. Grade A. Character accuracy last. This category asks whether the shots taken are plausible given range, movement, and the character's apparent training. Crockett's shooting mostly happens at realistic pistol fighting distances, and his accuracy noticeably drops whenever range increases or a target is moving, exactly the way it should for a trained but human shooter rather than an invincible action hero. The show even takes time to establish his range discipline directly in one episode, reinforcing that his skill on the street is earned through practice rather than granted by the script. Grade A. Averaging it all together, the Bren Ten earns an overall grade of A in this series, one of the most accurate firearms portrayals we have covered on this channel to date. Questionable recycled sound effects and all. So there it is, a gun built by a legend, chambered for a cartridge too powerful for its own good, and forever tied to a single unforgettable character. Sometimes being ahead of your time means the market is not ready for you yet, and sometimes it means you end up defining an entire decade of television instead, remembered fondly long after the company that built you faded into a footnote. Before you go, one quick favor. If you are not already subscribed with notifications turned on, YouTube's algorithm tends to quietly stop recommending a channel to you after a few weeks of inactivity. So hitting that bell is honestly the only way to guarantee these breakdowns keep showing up in your feed. This channel truly appreciates every single person who takes the time to watch, and it genuinely is what keeps this whole series worth making week after week. Smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dives just like this one, and drop a comment telling me which other 80s TV detective deserves a full breakdown next. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.